This is Morocco, a country on the northwestern tip of Africa on the 21st of October. A group of civilian and military members of the Paris Front block, the only crossing point between Morocco and Mauritania, preventing commercial and civil traffic from reaching its destination, threatening to break an already fragile ceasefire that lasted for 29 years. The Moroccan government alerts the UN Secretary General, who in turn asks the Polisario to withdraw, a request that the Polisario ignored. After 10 days of the same situation, Morocco takes action and pacifies the area. Paris forces retreat with no casualties reported on either. Skip forward 1 month. The United States officially recognizes Moroccan sovereignty over the long-disputed Western Sahara region, becoming the first Western country to open a consulate there. To understand a story, we need to go back. Way back. The borders of Morocco changed throughout the years, depending on the current geopolitical situation and the powers at the time. There were ebbs and flows as different dynasties took the seat of power. At times, the borders reached as far as Th in the north and Timbuktu in the south, and at other eras it shrunk due to shifting powers during earlier times, before paved roads and transportation became available. It was challenging to maintain permanent influence on the more remote regions. While some of the nomadic tribes of the Rif Atlas Mountains and the Sahara did fail allegiance to the monarch, pay taxes, and engaged in trade, other tribes that were far from the central government decided to keep to themselves and regarded the Sultan merely as a spiritual figure. As centuries passed by and other regional powers grew, more and more eyes were looking at Morocco for its strategic position. Yet it proved time and time again that it was far from being an easy prey. In 1558, the Ottoman Empire had swept across most of the Middle East and North Africa. Morocco was the last frontier standing in the way of Solomon the Magnificent's ambitions of expanding to the Atlantic. But Morocco pushed back wave after wave of Ottoman attack, never allowing them to find a foothold there. Once again, in 1578, the Portuguese King Sebastian I would die trying to invade Morocco in the Battle of the Three Kings, along with all of his army and nobility, ending his dynasty and causing the weakened Portugal to be annexed by Spain. As the years went on and the technological gap began to widen between Europe and the rest of the world, smaller countries found themselves at the mercy of an imperialist wave by 1900. Most of Africa had already been divided among the major colonial powers in what's known as the Scramble for Africa. The lion's share belonged to France and Britain, as well as other colonies belonging to Portugal and Italy. By this time, Morocco is one of the last free countries on the continent. The neighboring Algeria has already been a French colony since 1830. After Spain's loss in the Spanish-American War of 1898, it shows interest in Morocco to bolster its influence in the region. However, since France and Britain also show interest, the situation lingers. After a few years of negotiations, France and Spain agreed to sign a protectorate with the Sultan. In 1912, based on disagreement, Spain would control the northern Mediterranean strip and the southern region of the Sahara, while France would administer the rest. 2 years later, World War I erupts and the world is thrown into chaos. As the case with many colonies, tens of thousands of men are conscripted from Morocco, Algeria, and the rest of French colonies to fight and die on European battlefields. Due to the French expansion into the interior regions of the Atlas Mountains, several Amazon tribes united and opposed the French campaigns. The Zion War, named after its leader, would last from 1914 until his death in 1920, when France would launch a sweeping attack across the Middle Atlas and subdue the local tribes up in the north, now called Spanish Morocco. Spain would attempt to enlarge its territories and begins pushing deeper into the Rif Mountains. Resentment would grow in the Rif region, an area known for its sprout Amio tribes that refused foreign rule beginning in 1920. Several Ryan tribes, outnumbered and under-equipped, would rally under the leadership of Abraha and win several battles against the Spanish forces using guerrilla tactics, beginning with the Battle of Amla, where 3,000 Ryan irregular forces defeated more than 20,000 Spanish troops. This defeat would go down as one of the worst defeats in modern Spanish military history. On the 8th of September, 1920, a combined forces of Spanish and French armies would lead an amphibious landing in El Joma, commanded by the dictator of Spain, General Miguel Primavera. Among the participating officers there was the Van Colonel Franco, who would be promoted to General Brigadier for his leadership in the Rif War. This campaign effectively ended the Rif War and led to the surrender of Al-Dhabi in 1920. Beginning in 1934, Spanish Morocco started being governed directly from the TED 1 headquarters in the north instead of Cape Ju being the previous location. The same Franco, who now commanded Spanish regular troops in Morocco, would play a major role in the Spanish Civil War starting in 1936 until his victory, signaling the beginning of Francoist Spain in 1939. Resistance against the colonial rule would continue in smaller scale by young Moroccan until Farhat Hassid, a Tunisian independence activist, was assassinated by the French intelligence agency, the Red Hand, on the 5th of December, 1952. This sparked an outrage in North African French colonies, leading to vast protests and demonstrations in Algeria, Morocco, and several other countries. In response to these events, a group of Moroccan youth formed the Moroccan Army of Liber, a militia resistance force whose goal is to free the country from colonization. In 1956, Morocco would finally gain its independence from France. Spain would also give up control of the majority of its occupied territories in Morocco except for Ceuta, Melilla, Cape Duby Evening, and the Western Sahara. Unwilling to accept this, the Moroccan Army of Liberation would move south to liberate the rest of the occupied territories. This would soon garner much support from the local populations that resented the occupation. Violent demonstrations against Spanish rule erupted on April 10, 1957. This marks the beginning of the Evening War between the Spanish Army and the Moroccan Liberation Army, who now gained the support of King Mohammed V and received reinforcement, becoming the Sahara Liberation Army. After a year of ongoing hostilities, Spain sought the help of its old friend France. The combined forces led a joint air fleet of 150 planes and 15,000 soldiers on February 1958. This inflicted heavy losses and weaned the Liberation Army. On April 2, 1958, the governments of Spain and Morocco signed the Treaty of Angers, which would give Morocco the region of Cape Juiy. After Morocco had gained independence from France, the Moroccan king continued to support Algeria's war for independence against French rule. Morocco smuggled arms, money, and medicines to Algerian national liberation France forces. Morocco also served as a rear base for Algerian insurgents to set up training camps for newer recruits during this period. King Mohammed V refused to negotiate with France over the precise outline of Morocco's borders with Algeria, which since 1830 hadn't been clearly outlined. The borders that were left by France didn't make any much sense. They were imprecise and at times contradictory. The first one, known as the Vert Airline, was proposed as early as 1912 by Maurice. A second, known as the 3K line, was proposed in 1938. Algeria would ultimately gain its independence in 1962 after a long and bloody struggle. But unfortunately, the border issue would create more problems due to a disagreement between Morocco and Algeria over the status of two regions, Beja and Chino, which Morocco claims were under its influence before the colonization. Tensions grew between the two countries, leading to the short-lived Sand War of 1963. The conflict lasted for 1 month, in which Algeria was backed by Fidel Castro, who sent military aid, training tanks, and weapons at peace. The treaty was signed on February 20, 1964, after the United Nations General Assembly created the Special Committee on Decolonization. Morocco urged Andalusni and Western Sahara, still under Spanish control, on its lists for non-self-governing territories, which were formally mentioned in the resolution of October 1964. This would be the first instance where the UNWIF formally urged Spain grant independence to the rest of colonized territories in Morocco. At this period, Mauritania, a country on the south of the Sahara, started lobbying to unify the Western Sahara with its own territory based on their shared culture and geography, further complicating the situation. Both Morocco and Mauritania ultimately in favor of granting self-determination to the people of the Western Sahara to express their will regarding their future. In 1969, under international pressure, Spain finally returned the territory of Ifni to Morocco, but the story of the Western Sahara was far from over. Several attempts were made by the UN to prepare and supervise a referendum in the Sahara between 1967 and 1974, but the Spanish government, still under the Franco regime, kept voting against the UN resolution. Meanwhile, a group of Sahara students who were studying in Marrakesh requested the King of Morocco, Hassan II, for financial and logistical support to fight the Spanish occupiers, which was refused due to Morocco's preference for diplomatic rather than violent solutions to solve the issue. These students would later formally create the ZAO Front, standing for the Popular Front for the Liberation of the Sogui Hamra and Rio de Oro. The newly formed PERI would begin to launch attacks on several Spanish outposts. Their power would grow as more and more enormous. Former Spanish auxiliary forces comprised of tribesmen began deserting and joining the Polisario, bringing weapons and training with them. Spain continued installing, claiming that the Western Sahara was Theranos or nobody's land when it occupied it. Therefore, Spain believed that Morocco, when more, had no claims over the territory. This claim was disputed by the two countries, leading to consulting the International Court of Justice, which issued an advisory opinion in October 1975, denying the Spanish claims that Western Sahara wasn't nobody. And the legal ties of allegiance did exist between the Sultan of Morocco and some of the tribes living in the territory of the Western Sahara. But the Court of Justice ultimately found that this data was not enough to prove a claim of Moroccan sovereignty over the disputed territory and expressed its support for the principle of self-determination in early November 1975, an event that would be a turning point, and this story was taken shape. The King of Morocco, Hassan II, gave a rallying speech, stressing the need to liberate the Western Sahara from Spanish occupation, after the UN efforts did not yield any concrete results. 350,000 unarmed Moroccans responded to the call. A march of enormous proportions converged in the city of Taraya, previously known as Cape Jupi, and began crossing into the Spanish-held Sahara, holding the Moroccan flags and the Quran banners calling for the return of the Moroccan Sahara. The color green for the march's name was intended as a symbol of Islam and peace. This caught Spain off guard as the country was in a political crisis. Franco, who ruled Spain for 36 years, was in a coma, and the country was in no position to start another colonial war. As the marchers reached the Spanish armed forces were ordered not to fire to avoid bloodshed. Spain would then agree to enter negotiations with Morocco and Mauritania, leading to the Madrid Accords of the 14th of November. The treaty divided Spanish Sahara between Mauritania and Morocco. Morocco and Mauritania then formally annexed the parts they were assigned in the Accords. Morocco was given control over the northern parts, the Saja Hamra, and approximately half of Rio de Oro, while Mauritania proceeded to occupy the southern third of the country. Algeria, still harboring discontent after the Stand War, did not like the fact that it was not consulted in the Madrid Court, especially that it had hopes of gaining an outlet to the Atlantic Ocean through the Western Sahara. The Madrid Accord would not go down well with Polisario, who now had the support of Algeria and had access to the Soviet weapons and training. On December 11, 1975, the first Moroccan troops arrived in Laon and fighting erupted with the Polisario. At the same time, the battles of Laguain took place when the Maurian army moved to the southern parts of the Western Sahara, according to its agreement with Spain, following an infiltration of heavily armed Algerian soldiers into the oasis of Fala. Inside the Moroccan territory, Morocco sent troops to repel the attack. The Battle of Amgal lasted for 36 hours after the Algerian forces retreated behind their borders. The Pari would go then to proclaim the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic on the 27th of February, 1976, and create a government in exile inside Algerian territories. The Polisario Front retaliated the Moroccan offensives with guerrilla attacks and moved their base to Chino in western Algeria, where the first refugee camps were established in May 1970. The Lazar moved tens of thousands of Sahrawi people into the Hindu refugee camps where they would be trapped indefinitely. For the next 2 years, the Polisario movement had expanded to thousands of armed fighters, as Algeria and Libya under Gaddafi supplied arms and funding. Kim Il-sung, the founder and dictator of North Korea, also provided support to the Polisario Front, as they shared similar ideologies on the other front. Mauritania continued to wage 4 years of war against the Polisario guerrillas. In December 1977, France intervened after French civilian technicians were taken as hostages in a Polisario raid on the Zourat's iron ore mines. The French Air Force deployed Jaguar jets to Mauritania in 1978, which repeatedly bombed Polisario columns with napalm. The Polisario Front launched a raid on the capital in Nouakchott, during which Polisario leader Alouli was killed and was replaced by Mohamed Ablaziz. The Mauritanian regime of Ould still proved unable to fend off the guerrillas, and his disastrous performance in the war was a major reason for the Mauritanian armed forces' decision to overthrow him. A year later, after a coup d'état that deposed the president, Mauritania finally withdrew in the summer of 1979 when they signed the Algiers Agreement with the Polisario Front and renounced any claims on the Western Sahara after the departure of the Maurian forces. Morocco annexed those territories in August 1970. The Moroccan government proposed a national referendum to determine the Sahara Territory's sovereignty in 1981. The referendum was to be overseen by the Organization of African Unity, but the proposal failed as they would not reach agreement over referendum procedures. The Organization of African Unity admitted the SADR as a member in 1982, which Morocco considered as a challenge to its territorial integrity, and subsequently left the Union. In 1984, the repeated infiltrations and guerrilla surprise attacks by the Pari pushed Morocco to build a 2,700-kilometer-long earthen wall that divides the Moroccan-administered portion of the Western Sahara from that held by the Pari Front. The Moroccan army stationed troops in military posts stretched along the sand wall with minefields in to deter infiltrations by the Pari militias. This put the war on hold, but no side able to achieve decisive gains. But artillery strikes and sniping attacks by guerrillas continued on the 24th of February 1985. The Polar 3, a German research airplane from the Outside VI Institute, was shot down by guerrillas of the Peri Front over the Western Sahara. All 3 crew members died. Polar 3, together with unharmed Polar 2, were on their way to Antarctica and had taken off in the cars in Senegal to reach the Canary Islands. On the 7th of October, 1989, Lazare launched a massive attack against Moroccan troops in Goldet, but sustained heavy casualties and withdrew after leaving dozens of tanks and armored vehicles burning in order to resolve the sovereignty. The UN had attempted to hold a referendum through the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara, or MINURSO, and is holding direct talks between the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front. After the intervention of the UN in 1991, a ceasefire was signed between the factions, effectively freezing the conflict. A referendum was then supposed to take place in 1992, but this never happened, as both parties did not agree over who could claim Sahrawi ethnicity and who would be allowed to vote on Western Sahara and independence. The former U.S. Secretary of State, James Baker, was named the envoy to the Western Sahara, and he was tasked with drafting a peace plan. For the first time, he succeeded in bringing the Moroccans and Saharas face to face in June. The plan proposed a period of autonomy for the Western Sahara under provisional Moroccan sovereignty, followed by a referendum through which Sahrawi settlers would vote on either the integration with Morocco or independence. The plan was accepted by Morocco, but was refused by the Polisario Front. Another plan put forward by Baker also failed upon the death of King Hassan. The new monarch Mohammed II realized that the previous referendum attempts were not realistic, and in 2006 gave a new proposition for self-governance, which means that the Sahrawi regions would have their own government and their own parliament under the sovereignty of the Moroccan kingdom and in accordance with the Moroccan constitution. This was a diplomatic solution which many great powers, but unfortunately the Sahrawi refused this proposition, which led down to the breakdown of the Manhattan negotiations of 2007. In April 2009, 229 members of the U.S. House of Representatives called on President Obama to support Morocco's autonomy plan and to assist in drawing the conflict to a close. The signers acknowledged that the Western Sahara has become a recruiting ground for radical Islamists. These fears would prove prophetic, as one of the members of the Polisario, after receiving his training there, would leave JDU and head to northern Mali to join the Katiba Targeta unit of al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb in 2011. The same person, Abu Ali al-Sahrawi, would found the Movement for Oneness and Jihad in West Africa, alongside other Malians and Mauritanian extremists. Al-Sahrawi would soon become one of its most senior members and official spokesman. 2 years later, he would meet Mukhtar bin Mukhtar, an Algerian terrorist leader of Al-Mulathamin group, and merged both their groups in August 2013 to form Al-Murabitan. Fast forward to 2015. ISIS is now controlling vast territories in Iraq and Syria and calling terrorists from all over the world to join their jihad. Al-Sahrawi soon declared his allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi on May 13, 2015, and formed the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. This group is primarily based in Mali, operating along the Mali-Niger border, and has claimed responsibility for several attacks under al-Sahrawi's leadership, including the October 4, 2017 attack on a joint U.S. Nigerian patrol in the region of Tangutongo in Nigeria, which killed 4 U.S. soldiers and 5 Nigerian soldiers. The U.S. Department of State's Rewards for Justice. He's offering a reward of up to $5 million for any information leading to the identification or location of Adnan Abu Ali al-Sahrawi. After Morocco's return to the African Union in 2017, various countries built new consulates in the 2 Sahrawi cities of Lyon and Douala, recognizing the sovereignty of Morocco over the Sahara as the most reasonable solution for stability in the region. In December 2020, the U.S. officially recognized Moroccan sovereignty over the Western Sahara and opened a consulate in the city of Lyon. Several other countries followed its lead at the same time. Another agreement between the Moroccan and Israeli governments was taken place in order to resume diplomatic relations and launch direct flights between the 2 countries, an important step for peace and to connect the Jewish diaspora community in Israel, which migrated from Morocco in the 50s and 60s with their ancestral home. Following these events, the Peri retaliated by breaching the terms of the ceasefire and launching an attack on the uncontrolled crossing of Guara, a buffer zone at the southern borders of Morocco that was cleared from Moroccan soldiers in 2017. Since then, the Peri continued to provoke and disturb the region, stopping shipments from crossing the border, and the Moroccan authorities continued to send complaints to the UN and to the MANSO without any replies. After the failures to resolve these provocations diplomatically, the Moroccan forces had to intervene to pacify the situation and to resume traffic. The Moroccan government has been actively engaged in investing in the building infrastructures, creating job opportunities, and providing amenities and fuel to the population. Since minimal rainfall in the territory inhibits any agricultural production, fuel is sold at half the price there and basic goods are heavily subsidized. Businesses operating in the territory do not pay taxes in addition to the Atlantic. Morocco's new development model for the south includes several wind farms and other social infrastructures across Western Sahara. Unfortunately, while 500,000 Saharas who are living on the Moroccan side of the Sahara benefit from this, almost 100,000 of their relatives are still held in refugee camps on the other side, under Polisario's influence, where corruption and human rights violations continue unseen. We will know their story in the third and final part in this series.